Nice little pot. Would have been a little, maybe quart size jar. Can learn a lot from a piece like this about how the pottery was made, because you can see the pinch marks and you can see the size of that rim coil. Hey guys, you'd probably never guess it by the looks of where I'm at, but 700 years ago this would have been the middle of a bustling Mogollon village. I came here today to talk about how to recreate ancient lost pottery styles. I'm going to show you how I look at the sherds, what I'm looking at, and how I use that information to help recreate these ancient pottery styles from the Southwest. So come along with me. The type of pottery I've worked hardest at recreating over the years is Salado polychrome. It looks like this. It's black organic paint on a white slip. And in this area, southeast Arizona, it kind of took the area by storm in the 1300s. It's unique to this area because it has organic paint, it has white slip, and it's painted with Anasazi style designs. Previous to the 1300s, almost all the decorated pottery that was made in this area was red on brown. And then this stuff shows up about 1300 and it's found all over the place. So while I'm out here, I'm picking up these Salado polychrome sherds and I'm looking at them to see what I can learn about how the prehistoric potters made it. Let me show you. This planeware is exactly what I'm looking for when I go to study the pottery at a site. And I'll tell you why. Although the decorated pottery could have been imported from a different village, this big crude planeware was not being imported. It was being made here or a very nearby village. And so by looking at this, we can tell what pottery made here looks like. We can tell what the clay in this area fires to. First of all, if we look at the ground here, we see that it has a lot of quartz in it. And that's because the nearby mountains are mostly granite. If we look at the temper, that is the sand that's added to the clay, on the cross section of the sherd, we can see a lot of large chunks of quartz. This is a good indication that this is a local clay. Also the fact that when we look at numerous sherds in the same area, we see the same characteristics, that fairly large quartz sand added to the temper, and about that same shade of brown that the pottery fires to. So that gives us a baseline to look at. This is what the local clay looks like. Here's some nice examples of Salado polychrome. You can see that this is not the same clay body as the local planeware. It's much finer. It's a thinner piece of pottery. Most of that planeware was quite a bit thicker as well, probably because they didn't have really good quality clay in this area. So that's a good idea that this was imported. That clay doesn't have the same sort of temper in it either. That chunky quartz-based temper is not there. It's another piece. This is a piece of Tonto polychrome, and you can see it has some design areas here and then red around it. And once again, totally different texture to the clay. Much finer quality clay, much finer temper, thinner pottery. Fires to a more of a sandy brown color than that reddish brown that the local clay was firing to. Now on a lot of these, if it's a bowl like this one, they've slipped red on the outside of that polychrome bowl. So by looking at it, that's not the color of the base clay. That's a red slip on the base clay. And this also is a bowl. So you need a jar in order to tell what the actual clay color is on these polychromes. And this is a jar. Because the inside is not smoothed at all, you can still see the scrape lines from when they scraped that. Let me show you another thing you can learn from these ancient sherds. Here's a Salado polychrome sherd for you. Once again, it's got a little bit of a red slip on the outside. But the interesting thing is, in this case, the slip is actually flaking off. Now that's common with Salado polychrome because that slip has a high shrinkage rate. So if you look at it under a microscope, really even under a magnifying glass, you see crackles, little lines, cracked lines all through it, because it's what they call a poor fit. It has a different shrinkage rate than the body clay, so it always crackles. And if you get it too thick, it's likely to kind of flake off like this. But what this really tells us, the flaking, and if you can see a cross section like here, you can see that slip is micro thin. The slip is amazingly thin. So it was being applied super thin. So when you're trying to recreate this, you need to be careful that you not get it too thick. But also the crackles tell us why it was applied so thin. If you get it too thick, it comes off. So we're looking for something that fires fairly white, will turn organic paint black, which is in itself a trick, and has a high shrinkage rate. So I've been looking around at the pottery at this site for a while, and I can tell you one thing for sure. Looks like all of the Salado polychrome was being imported. None of it seems to match the local planeware when looking at the cross section. So the next challenge is to find where that Salado polychrome was being imported from, so that we can go there and look at their clays, so that we can try to recreate it exactly the same with the same clay and the same temper. Nice piece of corrugated there. See the texture on that? Those are the pinches that they use to attach the coils that haven't been smoothed out. And then it's smooth on the inside. There's another piece of the same jar. And then this, like a little piece of Salado polychrome. Red on the outside, white on the inside. It was a bowl. Every canyon coming off of these mountains has a unique signature in the sands in the creek flowing out of that canyon. So this canyon will have certain percentages of certain minerals, whereas the next canyon over will have different amounts of other minerals. And so archaeologists can then look at the sands from each drainage coming off of a mountain chain, and they can identify that unique mineralogical signature for that area. Then they take a sherd, like this Gila polychrome sherd here. They take it to a laboratory and they create what they call a thin section. They will take a tiny microscopic slice right through the middle of this sherd, so thin that light can pass through it, and they'll mount it on a slide so they can look at it under a microscope. Then a ceramics analyst can look at that under the microscope and determine exactly where that sherd was made, where the temper that was added to that clay came from, which drainage in a mountain range. It's an interesting way to know where sherds were coming from. So although in the field I can look and compare it visually against the local brownware, archaeologists can much more precisely pinpoint where these sherds were coming from. And one thing that they have said about the Salado polychrome in this area is a large amount of it was coming from down by the Gila River. So let's go over there and look at some of the clays they have, see if we can find something that once it's fired will match the clay on the sherds that we've seen at this site. Here's a very weathered piece of Salado polychrome. The white is kind of coming off of there. The black isn't very good. Always make sure you leave the sherds where you found them. When I was younger, I used to collect sherds. And what I've learned over the years is that the real joy in these artifacts is in the discovery. So if you leave them, you're allowing somebody else to have that joy of discovery later. Taking them from here not only is illegal, but it's very selfish. These are some of those Salado polychrome replicas that I was talking about. So these are made with a local brown clay, an imported white slip from northern Arizona. What I'm working on right now is trying to reproduce more closely the brown body clay that the Salado potters were using. This one uses a red body clay that comes from the Tucson area, where there wasn't much, if any, Salado polychrome being made. So in my next video, I'm going up to Pima, Arizona to explore for that clay that the potters were actually using in the 1300s to make Salado polychrome. So make sure you check that out. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about my reproductions of ancient pottery, check out this video over here, which will take you more in depth on that process. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.